The trip. Unless practicing criminal law, it would, for all practical purposes, be unnecessary for Edinburgh lawyers to even ever think about Pilton Estate, far less go there. But for those who move in the illicit world of car theft, drug dealing, and arson, the place was the motherlode, sitting on the extreme northern edge of the city, not a thoroughfare, more of a loop. They had lived most of their adult life in Edinburgh, but this was David and Eddie's introductory stop in Pilton. Eddie turned off the main road and into the narrow, garbage-trimmed streets and had to overcome an instinct to drive fast in order to get out quickly. Paul, the local boy and aspiring actor, leaned forward to watch his companions and newly found fencing coaches for a reaction. He eventually had to start giving them directions to the 5-story block of flats where he lived. They pulled up beside a patch of ground designed to contain grass, but were actually featuring several beer cans and a single sad sapling clinging to a handful of yellowing leaves. "I'll be a couple of minutes," Paul locked the door as he left and ran towards the entrance of the building. Eddie looked over the top of his sunglasses at David. Experienced trial lawyers, more than facing experts, they were practiced in maintaining an enigmatic facade. In their trade, the raising of an eyebrow would replace a whole monologue. No words passed in the 30 seconds it took for Paul to depart, and for a dog with the look of a collision between a Gorky and a Rottweiler to stroll over and cock his leg on the front wheel of the Audi. This action was followed by the arrival of 3 boys, any one of whom could have been the dog's owner. The eldest, who looked to be somewhat between 10 and 12, and who was wearing athletic apparel, signaled for David to lower the passenger window. The boy wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. In the few seconds of the unfolding scene, an agreement was subliminally negotiated. It was obvious that David's West of Scotland accent was likely to serve better in the world of the tough kid than Eddie's old Etonian one. And so Eddie adopted a pose, straightened his sunglasses and stared forward. He purposefully looked over the steering wheel, not making even the slightest eye contact with the intruder. David allowed the window to slide down to the halfway position. He said nothing but squinted at the young man over the edge of the glass. "You the guys who done the sword fighting?" David turned his head to join Eddie in looking through the windscreen as if he had no intention of answering. "How about teaching us?" "No chance," David said. David did not turn his head to look at the young boy. The lad swiveled to look at his 2 younger comrades, placing a hand on the side of the car. "See, I told ye, toffee-arsed bastards." David turned slowly. "We only teach a select few, and take your hand off my car." The young man ignored the command, left his hand where it was, and peeled open a piece of gum he had in his pocket. He threw the wrapper onto the ground before saying, "Like Paul?" "Aye, like Paul. Men who take pride in themselves." "I'm proud of myself. How's about me?" David now gave him what the boy would refer to in the retell as the death stare. "Firstly, pick up that wrapper, take care of your own shit. And secondly, don't ever let your dog pee on my car again." The only sign Eddie was alive was his slow breathing as he continued to avoid acknowledging what was happening to his left. He kept the engine running. David waited for the boy's next move and did not take his eyes from the grimy face at the window. All the while he silently estimated the cost of body damage that would be inflicted on the car in seconds with a key or by the baseball bat one of the younger boys had in his hand. Just for good measure, he also wondered if any of the trio had a big brother in the crowd of young men huddled around a shop doorway about 50 yards away. The leader bent to pick up the wrapper, but in rising came closer to the car window, seeking to swing the power locus of the conversation back to his side. "See those guys over there? They're already clocked your car, and they probably think you're drug dealers thinking of muscling in on their territory. So unless you're looking for trouble, I'd watch myself. I didn't think sword fighting do you much good in these parts. It's not like you're the frickin' Vengeance Squad. He was referring to the recent movie adaptation of the comic book squad of superheroes. What's your super frickin' power? Sword fighting? David was at eye level with the lad. He was eternally calm and knew it was both the tone and content that mattered in what he said next. You know the difference between us and the Vengeance Squad, he asked. Nah, said the boy, laughing and checking over his shoulder to see if his friends were listening. The difference is we're real. He paused for menacing effect. And just between you and me, Paul's one of our agents, so don't mess with him, and maybe one day he'll teach you some moves. And you'll tell those guys we're not drug dealers, okay? The boy said, fine. He pushed himself back from the window as David added, but most of all, remember, Paul's one of us. A gang? No, and that's all I'm saying. The car window then smoothly glided closed. Still not a word passed between him and Eddie. They stared silently forward. When he arrived on the scene moments later, Paul cuffed the same young man around the head, shadow-boxed him, and was laughing as he climbed into the back seat. Eddie slid the car away from the curb and waited until he turned a corner before bursting out laughing and saying, "That was awesome."